Canto 3. There was nothing of note in any direction. It all looked like dark rocks, and that was it. Cal looked at his hand and was unsettled at how it looked illuminated, even though there was no light source. He closed his eyes for a moment to calm his stomach. "I told you not to look too deep at it," Sophie reminded. "Right," he mumbled, but what was he supposed to focus on? It was all the same thing. They had walked with some unknown purpose for no more than 5 minutes and came upon a giant gate. It was a light gray granite and felt like the type of entrance one would find in front of an old asylum or boarding house. It was a welcome change, and he discovered he could focus on it without fear of losing his lunch. On the right side, there were deeply etched words that Cal could see were in Greek, but beyond that, all he could do was pick out a letter or two. "I wish I knew what it said," he whispered. Sophie put her hand lovingly over the words. "I am the way into the city of woe, to a forsaken people who would live in eternal sorrow. This is why divine omnipotence moved this architectural and sacred justice into place, created from primordial love and intellect. For those who think that they can carry anything that can outlast my love, abandon all hope if you enter." Cal wanted to feel the words too. Hearing her speak them felt so grandiose. He moved his hand close, but stopped short. Like the really old antiques in the store, he felt he needed to wear gloves or some other protective covering. "You speak Greek?" Absently, she looked over at him, and then realization hit on her face. "Oh, no. You can't read them because you don't understand them. When you understand them, you'll be able to read them too. This place is a wonder like that." Wanting to see them too, he asked, "What do the words mean?" She smiled. "It means there is no salvation but through God." She lightly put her forehead to the words, closing her eyes when she did. "Shall we?" she asked when she was done. Cal didn't think anything special of the gates. He assumed they were like a mile marker or a stop on the way. Shrugging, he motioned for her to lead the way, which she did. Passing through the gates, though, everything changed. Now, instead of lifeless rock, there was lush green grass spreading out into a giant field. Above him was a brilliant blue sky. Turning around revealed the gates had disappeared, and now there was grass and sky in its place. This direction revealed a hill in the distance, and on that hill was a pile of gold so large it couldn't be imagined. In front of the pile were so many people, each running with a little flag. Each flag was unique in their own way. There were state and country flags, team flags, political flags, family crest flags, and flags he had no idea. They were all small and were being held by a person running for their life. "Is this hell?" Cal questioned, feeling a cool breeze hit him as he asked. Sophie lightly clicked her tongue. "I told you this place was a wonder. Judging by your face, I'd say this was not what you were thinking." "Did you have this in mind?" Sophie playfully jabbed. "Not at all," Cal marveled. In the distance beyond the gold and sloping down beyond it, there was a beautiful blue-green river. A cruise ship sat docked on its pier. "This is kind of how I'd imagine heaven would look." "Then you're not looking very closely," Sophie said matter-of-factly. She looked at her watch before pointing to a collection of flag wavers. "Let's get closer and you'll see what I mean." As they drew in, Cal saw each flag-waving person was being chased by a swarm of insects. Every once in a while, one would fly beyond the swarm and sting the person. So that's why they were all running. Each of them were being chased by their own personal swarm. Why? Was all he could bring himself to say. First, what does this look like to you? Sophie quizzically asked. I wasn't going to ask, but since you look like it's all so wonderful, I want to know. You can see as well as I can, Cal was confused. Does this not look amazing to you? Sophie nodded. We don't see the same thing. Then pointing to the people running, she added, and all of them are seeing something different too. What do you see? Ah, he emoted, not knowing what to say. How could these people be seeing something different than him? He decided to answer the question to get to the bottom of it. It's a beautiful grassy field. Up ahead, there's a wide river with a cruise ship on it. In front of me, to the left, is a huge pile of gold. He smiled a little as the breeze hit his face again. You don't see a pile of antiquities you've always wanted to get your hands on? Sophie prodded. Cal quickly shook his head. And I'm not terribly interested in the gold. Why? What is everyone else seeing? Sophie went to speak and then stopped, looked and thought, and then started over. Every level is different for every person. Here, that pile will always be something you need. Like, maybe for you need to get out into nature instead of worrying about money. Cal quickly breathed in. Money was something he was currently worried about. How was he going to make enough of it to feed himself and take care of his aging mother? Being outside was something he deeply loved, but not necessary to what he needed. He almost didn't catch her next part as the first part seemed to hit him so perfectly. And I'm pretty sure your grandfather will get stuck here. This is a place where dragons often get stuck. Dragons? Was she calling his grandfather a mythical beast? Or would he actually transform into one when he got here? There are all different types here, Sophie began to explain. Mostly, it's filled with those who couldn't let go of their stuff. Some call them opportunists, but I just see people afraid to die, and they became selfish in the process. Cal was about to speak when she cut in again. And hoarders. They're not really opportunists. Poor souls. What Cal was going to ask related to the insects, but her last statement caused him to redirect. Hoarders? Hoarding's a sin? Anything that draws us away from God is a sin, and that includes hoarding. What does hoarding have to do with insects? Cal wondered out loud. Insects? Sophie repeated and realized what he was saying. Oh, you see insects chasing the people, don't you? But she didn't wait for him to answer and continued anyway. When a person arrives here, they're told if they can get their flag to the boat, they can take what they wish with them into heaven. For all, it's whatever they see in that pile. It might be, and often is, objects, but it can also be justification for their selfishness. Maybe selfishness that they didn't actually hurt others. A dictator might see the people murdered during his or her regime, all happy and well. Meanwhile, while they hold their flag, their worst fear chases them. You see insects, and I see clowns. Sophie shivered. Oh, I hate clowns. Still frustrated about hoarders going to hell, but strangely interested in what was happening, Cal asked, why must they be chased? Sadly smiling, she answered, this is the eye of the needle. It's easier for a camel to pass through here than a rich person. People can't take their stuff into heaven, so here they remain until they face the fear that caused them to believe they needed the stuff. Cal considered this place. He did need to get out. Since his dad died, he had buried himself in the shop, and there he stayed. He had justified it by focusing on the elements he didn't like, namely the bugs. What do you see? You know, beyond the clowns, he asked, now that he had a firmer grasp on the place. Now? Sophie's eyes glazed over for a moment. It's a giant showbiz pizza with an amusement park in the distance. You see a cruise ship, but I see one of those dark rides. On the hill? She trailed off. My keys used to be there, but I passed this level, so there's nothing there now. So you can get out of hell. He had heard hell was eternal, and thinking of hoarders eternally tormented felt wrong. Sophie pointed to one of the people in the field. The person was still running, but she was also worriedly looking at whatever her pile was. Then she hard stopped, raised her hands in defeat, dropping her flag in the process. It was in dropping her flag that the insects chasing her stopped too. Then she dropped to the ground and started crying. She did this for a good 10 minutes before she picked herself up and began walking to the river. Does she get to go to heaven now? Cal asked. Maybe, Sophie affirmed, but almost always not. I know I didn't. Recentering herself and wiping a tear Cal didn't even realize that she had cried, she continued. We are on a timetable and we need to get home. This way. Sophie motioned her head away from the river and hill in the opposite direction. This gave Cal no more chances to ask questions because off she went. Not wanting to be left alone in hell, even a beautiful one, he quickly followed. She led him to a quaint house on top of a tree-lined hill. Cal wondered, What do you see? Same as you, she answered. It's my home. It's not a means to peel away sin. It's nice, isn't it? What's it doing here? It was more than a query. His whole concept of hell was beginning to unravel, and questions like the one he asked was a way to regain his bearings. Well, we wanted something close to work, but not too close to work. Also, you saw that in-between place. Would you want to live there? I just didn't imagine a beautiful Victorian-style home in the middle of hell, Cal confessed. Aw, you think it's beautiful? Thank you. She smiled with a big toothy smile that caught Cal off guard. Anyway, this is the edge of hell, most assuredly not the middle. No one wants to live in the middle. Anyway, as much as I appreciate your compliments, we got to get going. We've got a boat to catch. Running up the stairs, Sophie opened the door wide. Baby, I'm home! But just a drop in, I can't stay. Cal, who had cautiously climbed the steps behind her, held back to see who this baby was. Entering the doorway was a very normal-looking guy with short, curly hair and about 2 inches taller than Sophie, so probably about the same height as Cal. Honey, he exclaimed, wrapping her in a hug. Then he saw Cal standing awkwardly on the porch. A look of alarm took the place of his immediate joy. What happened? Why is there a guy with a heartbeat standing behind you? Cal began inspecting himself to see if maybe there was something on him that made him obviously alive. Babe, Sophie began, I want you to meet Cal. She motioned Cal in with a big dramatic arms, and when he didn't come in right away, once he officially stepped in, she continued, I need to take Cal through hell. Sophie's husband shot back. Absolutely not, he yelled, but not loud enough to startle either Sophie or Cal. Fred, Sophie playfully drew out. Looking about him wildly, he stopped his gaze on Cal, and a look of shame fell across his face. This is not the way to do this. He put his hands out in front of him. Where's my manners? Come, have a seat. Let me be a good host, and we'll do this the right way. As they were sitting, he added, Fred was the name my mother gave me. He held out his hand to Cal. I'm Sharon now. Cal shook his hand and cautiously sat down on the sofa in the living room. It is an old name passed down through generations. I ferry souls deeper into the... Then he began talking in his best monster voice. Bowels of hell. Sophie scowled. Don't say it like that. Despite Sophie's light objection, Charon continued. I do not take any soul, pulse or no, who are not prepared to cross. Charon's eyes lit on fire, causing Cal to shoot back. It's fine, Sophie consoled. He's just reading your soul. He does it all the time. That doesn't look fine, Cal retorted back. Speaking with flaming eyes, Charon casually leaned back. You're not ready. It's all over your soul. It's against the rules to take you in that form. Especially with the fiery eyes, Charon held a pose of superiority. He turned to Sophie to continue, but immediately sat up. You have something too. I thought we worked through it. What happened? Sadly smiling, Sophie held up her watch. His eyes going back to normal, Charon fell back into his seat. How much time does he have? Sophie looked back at her watch. According to this, 27 hours. Charon's eyes now glazed over as he stared at nothing in particular. Cal wanted to know more, but seeing the two of them conversing made him feel like it should have been a private conversation that he was eavesdropping into. Suddenly, Charon sat up and exclaimed, Go through the in-between. I can't take him. Baby, Sophie calmly replied. You have to take him. It's not a choice. I'm not asking. I was told by Lucy to take him this way. Running his fingers through his hair, he shook his head. Don't joke about Lucy. I'm not, she once again calmly answered. She actually came to me. Charon, who had his elbows on his knees and was shaking his head, looked up at Sophie. Worry spilled all over his face. Are you sure? Lucy? Fred, it was her. Dara and Kat were there too, but clearly Lucy had orders that came from higher than her. Charon dropped his head down again, and there it stayed for a good minute. Cal, uncomfortable with the silence, wanted to ask a question, but Sophie put her finger to her mouth and shook her head. Cal responded by looking expectantly and raising his hands in a questioning way. Then Sophie raised her hand up and mouthed the word, wait. When Charon looked up, he appeared resolved. I'll ferry him. Cal, do you see that vase against the wall over there? Cal looked over and saw a decorative table with a large terracotta vase on it. Inside the vase was a golden branch. It was a strange design choice, but it wasn't his, so he didn't see a reason to bring it up. He dumbly nodded. Charon nodded back. Bring the vase over here on the coffee table, he ordered. Confused, Cal looked from the vase to Charon. Okay. He had thought that the branch was just an ordinary branch spray-painted gold, but when he reached it, he realized it was actually gold. From a collector's point of view, it was quite impressive metalwork. He nearly touched it. Just bring the whole vase, he heard Charon say from behind him as his hand absently had begun reaching up to touch the branch. Realizing what he was doing, he shook his head. Right. He picked up the vase and carried it over to the coffee table. Perfect, Charon said once the vase was down and he was seated. Are you comfortable? Cal considered how strange that question was. I guess. Good, Charon answered. Pass the branch to me. The one in the vase. It was right there, and maybe closer to Charon than it was to Cal. Yes, Charon said authoritatively. Looking quizzically at Charon as he did it, he reached down to take the branch. Charon had held his hand out to receive it. I don't understand why I'm doing this, Cal admitted. Time is fleeting, so... Charon impatiently looked down at his hand. Right, Cal said, and he had no more than placed his hand on the branch. Then Cal fainted into the sofa.